I'm none other than Candace, the notorious treasure hunter. There must be some scheme I can deploy to distract the prince and sneak into Asker Castle.
The accompanying Grand Hero battle unit for this month's Fates banner is Candace, one of the capturable bosses. She appears as a one-off character from Midori's paralog. From what I've read over the years, it seems like Candace might have played a bigger role in the game, but obviously that didn't come to fruition. She's an adventurer, so in Fae, Candace will be a Cullen's Infantry archer. For stats, she has 38 HP, 45 attack, 36 speed, 25 defense, and 44 res. She has an attack super boon, and her attack and res are both pretty high for the class. Her physical bulk is a bit low, and 36 speed isn't that awkward, technically still useful, but generally not going to catch other natural speedsters, even with speed builds. We'll talk about stats more when comparing infantry archers because, boy, there's been a sudden increase of high-res options. Now, young Frederick got a unique weapon earlier, so we have another Grand Hero Battle Archer with an inheritable bow. Luckily, Candace has brought a more recent copycat weapon than Caster's 3-year-old bow. The Lucrative Bow Plus has 12 might. At start of turn, if unit is above 25% HP, grant the no follow-up status and the no panic status for 1 turn. If above 25% HP at start of combat, grant plus 5 attack and speed with a bonus plus X. X is going to be equal to the number of positive status effects on the user and the number of negative status effects active on the foe times 2. I'm really surprised we got this weapon, especially after last month where we got a reissued Pledgeon bow. Now, the Lucrative Bow Plus is the same as Wind Tribe Catria's White Wind Bow Plus. Not only is this less than a year old, but it's from a seasonal 4-star focus unit who also got put in the normal 5 Divine Code section. That was a nice gesture, but that's only one copy. Now with the Lucrative Bow, you can get a bunch more without summoning for Catria or spending Divine Codes, unless you merge Candace up. Like the new Attuned Azura, this weapon gives the user no follow-up and no panic statuses, no field buffs, but that's okay. No follow-up is really solid to get on an inheritable weapon. The other part of the weapon is its attack and speed boost. You get a base plus 5, but for every positive status on the user and negative status on the foe, you get another plus 2. This is uncapped. This weapon gives you 2 statuses, so it's already a plus 9 attack and speed weapon by default. It's going to require some team building, but if you have a team that goes heavy on status effects, then this weapon can crank out some impressive bonus speed. When Wind Tribe Catcher was released, that was the same time we got Prime 4, which wants 4 statuses for distant or close counter. This weapon gets you halfway there. If you want to run bonus Delver type skills, no panic also protects you from panic, but that's not going to stop buff neutralization. Now, the Lucrative Bow Plus is an incredible weapon, especially when so many inheritable Grand Hero battle weapons have been, to be honest, rather uninspiring. Most of these interesting inheritables came from the Tempest Rods units. The main issue for Candace is her base stats. 36 speed isn't the best if you're going to go for an all-out speed build. Candace is fast enough with this weapon to make no follow-up work against slower tanks, but is that worth using when it will fall flat against any modern speedy unit? Are there better options? Before we talk builds, Candace's other base skills are Glacies for her high res. She has defense plus 2 debuff with said high res, and Sorcery Blade 3, which grants adaptive damage when you're next to an ally mage. This is a rarer A skill, and it's needed for the Hexblade tier 4 A skills, but it's not the easiest to use at tier 3. This will be the first heroic Grell source of the skill. It is on Demo Lapis as well, but if you've never gotten a lot of Lapises, then understandably not so easy to get on demand. If you plan to merge Candace up, she's going to get plus 1 HP, attack, and res for the neutral nature. That is alright, but perhaps you want that extra attack super boon. Candace also has use for a res boon to squeeze out a little extra flat resistance that will be one of her strong suits. With that said, let's talk about our other high res free-to-play infantry archers. Last month we talked about Caster, who is only 3 speed faster than Candace. If you want to see some other high speed free-to-play options, I would direct you to that video because there's quite a lot. Meanwhile, for literally years, the only really high-res focused free-to-play infantry archer has been Niles since the launch of the game. In less than half a year, we've added 3 new options starting with Will, Spring Linhardt, and now Candace. Some things to note: Will has the lowest res but highest physical bulk. Candace has the highest speed with good attack and res. However, it is Spring Linhardt who is the most min-maxed for attack resistance at the cost of speed. Depending on your build, you may want the highest res option. For example, Linhardt's Caribou Plus is incredibly good for these types of archers because it's literally an attack and defense ploy weapon. You want as much flat res as you can get, so why wouldn't you choose the highest base res option? Linhardt also has a res super boon, so he actually has 3 more res than Candace at max investment. With that said, Candace is a totally fine user of the Carrot Bow, and her higher speed might matter for its Omnibreaker effect. Speed's always a fickle thing. In a general sense, if you want a high attack archer, Candace is a good option. I would go over a build specifically for high attack and res archers without worrying about speed. That is one of the benefits of being a free-to-play archer at the moment. They probably have one of the most diverse sets of non-arcane inheritables that can work decently well. One of those weapons is this Lucrative Bow Plus. Generally, you'd see this on a higher speed offensive archer, but Candace can make it work even on a budget. 36 base speed plus 9 from the weapon, and another plus 2 for the speed refine do add up. Candace can definitely use no follow-up against middling speed units, not investing in speed, or just the typical slower tanks. With her good base res, she can apply defense debuffs in a line via the Ploy C skill, and against lopsided high defense units like, say, Dimitri, then Sorcery Blade can target res. The main issue is that Sorcery Blade requires you to be right next to an ally mage when initiating. It's going to be tricky. You can use it defensively in a formation, but Candace will have lower physical bulk, and Lucrative Bow doesn't really add any extra defensive help. You're basically depending on her high res, and typically most mages don't have higher defense than res, so this skill is kinda awkward. If you want to replace it, you can go with an ideal A skill since Lucrative Bow Plus provides statuses. While Fury would have been nice for the extra ploy range, Lucrative Bow has an HP condition. For the same reason, Desperation gets a little risky despite it being a good combo with no follow-up. Like we talked with Azuro, no follow-up plus wind or water sweep can provide safety for doubling. You could take Heavier Flashing Blade for a 1-2 low cooldown special proc. In terms of extra statuses, the only free-to-play option is inflicting panic on the foe. Not exactly an easy thing to do, so grab some friends. Basically, for budget builds, Candace is kind of just looking into a full offensive setups, and that's where her lower base speed is a bit iffy. Defense ploy is nice, but running flat res skills is going to take away from speed options, and if you did want a budget ploy debuffing build, you really just want to grab Spring Linhardt's Carrot Bow Plus. You can go full res stacking and still get Omnibreaker potentially. With Lucrative Bow, you kinda have to outspeed, otherwise it's kinda wasted. With premium skills, there is obviously a lot more potential for bonus speed. Upgrade Sorcery Blade to Hexblade, and Insight provides the highest potential speed boost with a plus 6 field buff and another plus 6 in combat if Candace moves 3 spaces when initiating. Realistically, this will be plus 5 speed. With Hexblade Insighted statuses, you're going to get 4 more speed via Lucrative Bow, deny enemy field buffs when debuff speed with low speed and defense. Blade Session can give plus 9 attack and speed if attacking later in the turn. This is a lot of speed, but basically 0 extra defensive help. If Candace has to take a counterattack to get her double, she may survive a mage, but everyone else just targets her 25 base defense. You could run Desperation 4 for instant 2 taps, but that is basically just a makeshift Arcane Dark Bow setup, and Desperation 4 is not easier to get than that weapon. You might not get as much speed with bonus statuses on the field, but slaying from the Dark Bow is always a strong pickup. Essentially, I wouldn't recommend a full-out speed build. The idea of Lucrative Bow is having a very status-heavy team, whether it's bonuses on Candace or penalties on the foe. You do want speed for no follow-up, but I would try to add other effects such as cooldown or %DR, and then build upon that via your allies. Just an example, the recent male and female Robins have Raleigh Spectrum and Hush Spectrum. Those are excellent cooldown related skills to have with no follow-up. Validar or the new Fallen Julia Refine with Ploy C skills can inflict 4 statuses by themselves. Attuned Peony gives 3 statuses while dancing. Those are the types of teammates you want for this weapon. So, for some alterations, instead of Insight, I would consider Pledge. It only loses 2 to 3 speed, and you now have Breath type cooldown. Instead of Low, maybe go for a %DR B skill or Tempo 4 for half DR Piercing. Hexblade is neat, but Flash Bow is another cool option, and I will mention Prime 4 just because of the innate synergy of status stacking. The issue is using Close Counter with a 25 defense unit, not ideal. If you do want Close Counter with bonus stats, Close Bonus Doubler with full field buffing may be better. If you got good support, it can work. Obviously though, Candace is not going to be a super tank or anything. Now we mentioned Arcane Dark Bow for 1-2 taps, but this could be a Brave Bow too. We have so many to choose from, including White Cap and 3 ninja options. Candace has high attack, and she can definitely quad tanks assuming you get the opportunity. If you want a free follow-up but aren't jazzed about stacking speed, Arcane Nastron is a fun option. With Slang, you can get set up 2 cooldown Deadeye, pair it times Pulse, Pledge, or Tempo. The bonus attack of the weapon is going to help Deadeye scaling. As for the +R stat boost and %DR, this can lead to hybrid builds. Some offense, some defense. You can stack %DR and technically stack follow-ups, things like Brash Assault 4. With her higher res, maybe go for a counter-made setup with Melcy Disrupt. If you run a res boon, res stat refine, and 1 or 2 flat res boosters, then feel free to slot in a ploy Cisco for added support. Nastron is the generalist arcane option. Since Candace is similar to Spring Linhardt, I've copied over some builds I talked about in his review to briefly discuss. As mentioned, Caribou Plus is an awesome weapon for a support role. You stack flat res, inflict attack and defense ploy, and you get Discord. Ideally, you pair this with speed and res ploy 3 whenever that happens for full debuff coverage, and then you add the ploy status and exposure. Double Still Water or Phantom Res is fine, but you could opt for Fortress Defense and Res and Squad A Seals to preserve Candace's lower base defense. While you can use the B slot for another support skill like Ruse or Sabotage, we can add some spice with Lagoo's Friend. No %DR, we're just tanking with attack debuffs, flat DR, and stacking defense and res. If the foe attacks Candace without guard, she retaliates with a DR piercing 3 cooldown special. Since Carrot Bow can give a follow-up against foes with Discord, you can pull off the same for initiations. Now, for another instant cooldown build, Golden Yobo Plus can give -3 cooldown if the foe is debuffed. Use Candace's high res for ploy debuffing, initiate for instant Deadeye, or use Special Spare 4 for Luna and Iceberg. For max burst, if you can get -1 cooldown from somewhere, Glacies can do a ton of damage, and self-loop for later fights. Besides having a way to debuff, the idea of this build is that Candace and Linhardt have competitive res to avoid Scow's res check outright. Lagoo's Friend and Golden U-Bow both fail if Scow is in play. Unfortunately, the new Hush Spectrum is Scow without a res check, meaning doesn't matter how high your res stat is, you're gonna lose -1 cooldown and these setups fall flat. You can counter with Rally Spectrum though, so not all hope is lost. So, should you 5-star Candace? Unfortunately, to most players, she's just playing second fiddle to Spring Linhardt, who is barely a month old. Candace has high attack and res, and as we saw, we kinda don't really have a lot of free-to-play high-res options. Candace is totally fine for the role, and I talked about some unique builds this stat spread opens up. The issue is that Candace has 5 more speed than Linhardt, and that's it. For things like the Carrot Bow support playstyle or the Golden U-Bow instant cheese one-shots, speed doesn't really matter. Or I should say 5 more speed isn't enough to sway things for the most part. Gameplay wise, these builds just care about attack or res, and Linhardt has the higher numbers, is the same class type, and is barely a month old. Regardless, if you do not care about Linhardt, then use Candace if you want. She still fits those playstyles, and there isn't a ton of other high-risk competition besides Will and Niles. If you aren't using Candace, then her fodder is actually quite nice. Lucrative Bow Plus being a White Wind Bow copy is pretty amazing because the typical Grand Hero Battle inheritable weapons have not been great, let's just say that. No follow-up bow with uncapped attack and speed scaling is really fun, and it fits a support-heavy team, bringing a lot of stats buffs and debuffs. Candace can make the weapon work, but understandably we got some other high-speed free-to-play users players may choose instead. Overall, definitely a less depressing Grand Hero Battle than last month, more of a side greed situation than an outclass situation. I think the easiest solution to give Candace a better niche would have been to just make her literally any other color. We still don't have a free-to-play green Infantry Archer. Now, that's all I got to say about Candace for this video. Go beat her Grand Hero Battle map, and I will see you in the next one.